My name is Eileen Frey-Bowers, and I am the Dean of the School of Nursing and Health Professions. I want to first welcome our alumni to the School of Nursing and Health Professions, especially our alumni board members. And I'm so happy to see all of you return here to campus. I want to thank our students, our USF leadership, our faculty, staff, family, and friends for joining us tonight for this 2025 Crawford Lecture. It's a great honor to be with you here in community this evening. I'd like to briefly explain to you about the Crawford Lecture. The Crawford Lecture was endowed in Geraldine Crawford's memory to provide education for the community, and this was started in 1985 and has continued since then. We are ever grateful for her vision, and we dedicate each year's talk to her memory. And now, did I turn it off? Can you hear me? Okay. Sorry, I hit the button. And now I would like to welcome John P. Fitzgibbons, the interim president of the University of San Francisco, to join me up here to open our evening.
Don't worry, it's not long. From a letter of St. Ignatius of Loyola to the professors and the students of the college in Coimbra, Portugal. Give serious thought to your vocation so that you can give much thanks to God for so great a favor, and to ask God for the special help needed to correspond to it with courage and diligence. Both of these you must have in large measure if you are to attain the end you have in view. Try to maintain a holy and discreet fervor in your work and in the pursuit of learning, as well as virtue. With both alike, one energetic act is worth 1,000 that are listless. Close quotes. St. Ignatius, in speaking to the professors and students 478 years ago, is also speaking to us today. Literally. Quite literally. It takes courage and diligence to do what you have done. To live as you have lived, to change the world for the better from here. A university, especially a Jesuit and Catholic university, is a place where people are committed to doing the hard intellectual work of building a new world, committed to discovery and the teaching of truths. Our understanding of these truths at the University of San Francisco is that these truths are not immutable. They develop. They must be re-examined, added to continually. As our understanding of what is true changes, we too are changed, transformed in the process. USF can also help us to clarify unfamiliar and even unwelcome ideas. It can help us to seek understanding. It can urge us to examine critically, evaluate, and challenge them. We teach students how to think, not what to think. Courage, diligence, making the world more humane and just. That is the work of Dr. Timothy Chou. He lives in intellectual courage. His academic career makes clear the value of diligent work for the well-being of all people, God's people. The radical goal of reducing inequities, lowering costs, and improving health outcomes for children locally, globally, and especially rurally is the mission that can only be named as pioneering and prophetic. Such labor shares truth and changes the world for the better. Artificial intelligence, or AI, can be used for good or evil. It scares many, but not Dr. Chou. Doctor is building deep learning AI applications requiring large amounts of data, but the method he is using is new, and it is robust. Not using the architecture of past or even present, he has chosen wisely. Dr. Chou knows such architecture will not work in medicine. Dr. Chou and his team have developed a method that distributes privacy-preserving AI cloud infrastructure that moves AI applications to the data around the world. Whether a hospital, a clinic, or an ambulance. It is with great pleasure that I hand the mic back to our dean to introduce Dr. Chou.
Thank you so much, Father Fitzgibbons, for framing the relevance of this lecture and ensure that we are pursuing technology for the right reasons to achieve health equity and health justice. So we'd like to dedicate this lecture to Tim's mom, Mary, this evening, who was a nurse and instilled in Tim a love for healthcare. I'm not going to read his bio since you all have access to it, but I want to highlight that since I met Tim last year, I've been following his podcast, Pediatric Moonshot, and many of you know that I myself am a pediatric nurse practitioner, so this has particular relevance for me. And I continue to admire his determination and insightful approach to healthcare, especially focusing on children. So please, please warmly welcome Dr. Tim Chou, our distinguished guest speaker.
Mic on? Mic on. All right. First of all, thank you, Dean, for that introduction. And thank you, Father John, for probably the best introduction I've ever had. So today, I have the clicker. What I want to do for you is take you on a journey and a story, and we'll end with just exactly why I came out of retirement to do this. It may surprise everybody other than Father John. So with that, as the dean started, I thought I'd share with you that it's particularly an honor to come to a nursing school to speak. My mother was a nurse and a nurse educator. Just to give you a little bit of her bio, she was actually educated in China in like the 1930s as a woman. She actually went to the prestigious Peking University Medical College. She became the nursing director at one of the largest hospitals in Qingdao, China. And in 1949, if all of you know the story, she was evacuated out as the communists took over that area. She came to America, she met my dad, she had 3 boys, kind of lived the 50s lifestyle. And kind of in the middle of the 60s, we were all teenagers. My mom decided that, she was going to go back into nursing and she was going to become a nursing educator. And so at the ripe old age of 49 years old, she goes back and takes the state boards, which is like incredible. And the next year, she is teaching at Western Piedmont Community College, which she teaches there for 10 years as a nursing educator. So yes, thank you for dedicating this to her. I think about her often in the work that we're doing. One of the things she was very good at is she was very good at calligraphy. So I always start out this talk with, I hope I teach you some lessons for long life in your professional career, but at least I'm going to try to teach you a couple of lessons for long life in your personal life. So this is actually taken from a temple in Kyoto, Japan. It's believed to be over 500 years old. It's the 10 lessons for long life. So I can see you're all writing them down. Okay, you're not reading Chinese yet, so here's the translation. You're supposed to have, as you just did, more laughter, less anger, more action, less words, more vegetables, less meat, and the one I've always been amused by, the more bathing, less clothing. I guess if you're a Buddhist monk 500 years ago, what else was there to be entertained with? So like I said, hopefully I teach you some lessons that are useful in your professional life. But if nothing else, walk away with these. I was introduced, I'm going to tell you this as a story. So I have no medical background whatsoever. I used to say I knew the difference between a left and right ventricle because I knew the difference between left and right. But then I talked to a pediatric cardiologist and she said, yeah, that's because you just talked to adult cardiologists. So I know nothing about medicine. I had a long career in high tech. I was the first president of Oracle's cloud computing business. I retired from there. I actually went back to Stanford and started the first class in cloud computing. And it's there that, let's call it 8 years ago, a strange student shows up who wants to meet the professor. And I went, okay, fine. So we meet for breakfast. This guy walks in. I'm looking at him. He doesn't look like a regular student. Turns out he has an MD, an MPH, an MBA. He's chief of pediatric cardiology at the Children's Hospital of Orange County. Right, and I'm like, and he's like in his mid-50s, and he's decided to come back to Stanford to get a master's degree in bioinformatics because he's just watched Jeopardy and now believes that AI and big data and medicine need to meet. I love telling Anthony's story because it's a 2-year program. It takes him 3.5 years to finish because number one, he has a real job. He's chief of pediatric cardiology. Number two, he has no idea how to code. And number three, at the ripe old age of, I'm guessing 54, 55, he decides to adopt an 18-month-old and a 6-month-old. And he's a bachelor. So I like telling Anthony's story because I say it's never too late for any of us, right? So Anthony is my portal into your world, their world, our world of healthcare. And I want to take you through some of the things I learned there about some of the challenges that are being faced here and around the world. Just to start the story with, Anthony told me this on almost the first day we met. He's providing consulting for a team in Myanmar, a little girl with a heart problem. They want to share the ultrasound image with him. They cannot do it. She later on dies on the operating room table. About a month later, he does get to see the ultrasound, and he says, well, I could have actually told him what to do. We sometimes think of this problem very, like, oh, well, that's Myanmar. But it's actually fairly close to home. You probably don't realize this, but 60% of the counties in the United States have no pediatric expertise whatsoever. In the United States, 60%. 3 states have no pediatric emergency physicians, 0. We have about 3,000 pediatric cardiologists in the United States. And I just explained to you, you can bet they live in Los Angeles, San Francisco, right, Chicago, etc. There's 300 in India, and there's 1 pediatric cardiologist in the country of Rwanda. So when you look at that, you start to think about, well, is it all just about international? No, let's bring it close to home. Willits, California, some of you may know where that is. It's north of here, maybe about 3.5, 4 hours. There's a hospital there called Adventist North Coast, and they serve the city has a population of 5,000. There is no pediatric expertise up there whatsoever. 20 times a month, they ship kids to UCSF, Stanford, UC Davis, and Shriners Birmingham. 20 times a month. If you start to think about what's going on out there, this is a story that happened to a friend of mine. This is her nephew. He was a football player. He had a shoulder injury. He went in for optional shoulder surgery at a regional hospital in Arizona. There were complications during the surgery. They finally decided to airlift him out of there to CHLA. The CT scan, which by the way was on a CD-ROM, like, have you seen one of those lately? Yeah, it was on a CD-ROM, never made it onto the helicopter. He got there, he died later that day. Now, whether or not having the data would have mattered, having the ultrasound would have mattered, none of us are ever going to know, but there you go, right? That's the current state of our technology. You can also see cases of misdiagnosis. So this is a story from Southern California. A kid is playing Nerf ball with his friends. He falls. They believe he has a concussion. They take him to the regional hospital. He is CT scanned. They basically say, doesn't look like a concussion. He goes on with his life. 4 weeks later, his symptoms continue to occur, and he ends up getting referred into experts at Children's of Orange County. They could not get the CT scan at that moment in time back to the same old problem. So they actually re-imaged him. And they came to the conclusion he actually had brain cancer. And by the time that diagnosis happened, that was 6 weeks later. Ultimately, they did get to see the original CT scan, and they concluded they could have figured it out. Had they been able to see it, they could have figured it out. You can also see the implications of missing diagnosis that aren't just purely medical. This is actually a story out of Texas. Spent a little bit of time talking to the head of emergency medicine at Texas Children's. And this is a story of a kid in rural Texas who has a broken bone. He's x-rayed at the regional hospital. They come to the conclusion this is child abuse. The law enforcement is called in. The kid is taken to Texas Children's. He's re-x-rayed because you can't share any of this data. And the people at Texas Children's, who are experts in pediatric fractures, end up going, no, this wasn't. Now think of all the heartache, et cetera, that has happened during this for something which, as you will see in my future view of the world, never had happened. Let's move on to what you could call rare diseases. I sometimes spend time with folks in adult medicine who talk about rare diseases. I'm pretty convinced almost every children's disease is a rare disease, but this is an example of one. There's a condition called focal cortical dysplasia. It's actually a brain lesion. If left untreated, the child has epileptic seizures. There's actually a kid in Florida who basically, since he was 2 years old, for the past 10, 12 years, has had epileptic seizures 2 to 3 times a day. At night, he wakes up screaming. They imaged him very early on, MRI imaged him. They didn't see anything. He proceeded to go through a whole series of drugs. Some they could afford, some they couldn't afford. They were actually getting ready to put electrical implants in his brain, and they finally decided to re-MRI image him. Now this is actually, and this is how hard this job is, that on the left-hand side is actually, you see the little red arrow, actually points you at that brain lesion. Now, the fascinating part is, if you can find it, you can remove it, and the kid is cured for life. So now, good news, bad news. Good news, this only happens 25,000 times a year in the US. Bad news, no one pediatric neuroradiologist ever sees enough of these cases to be able to correctly diagnose this. Let's move out of rare and talk about things that aren't actually that rare. Congenital heart disease actually turns out to be the number 2 cause of death of children in Mexico under the age of 5. I mean, it's totally amazing. This is actually a story not from Mexico. This is actually a story from California. There was a kid born one day with a condition which I'm sure the medical people here could explain better, called transposition of the great arteries, meaning the left is now the right. They only figured this out after the baby was born because the baby turns blue because the blood isn't going in the right place. They had to end up flying in a catheterization doctor into this location to be able to do a procedure which basically opens up a space. I used to be able to pronounce this word, septometry. How do you pronounce that, Dave? Septoscopy. He performed one of those. They put him on the plane, got him to surgery, and the baby's okay, right? But congenital heart disease can be diagnosed using fetal echo out there. And there, as I will show you, many people starting to work in this because, just to use it as an example, it's not an infrequent thing to happen in a country as big as Mexico. Let's move out to the patient side and talk about the health professionals, the nurse, the doctor. I've been amazed, I will show you this later, how much time the nursing healthcare profession spends staring at an electronic medical record. It's crazy. As the quote says, it took me 15 minutes to figure out the sodium level. Or if you're a oncology drug infusion nurse, you're trying to figure out how much cisplatin has the patient been given, what's the total amount, were there any adverse reactions? The Journal of American Medicine did a study that even for the doctors, they are spending on average for even trying to figure out what one patient, their condition is. They are staring at 10 different screens to go do this. Now, just so you can understand the problem that they have, and you will see this in a minute, for a healthy patient, the medical record doesn't say much of anything, right? Okay, I went and got an immunization or whatever. Now, but for a chronic patient, or as we will show you, for a cancer patient, this is completely different. So, as you'll see, we actually ran some experiments with 2 cancer patients. One whose medical record is 3,500 pages. The other is 35,000 pages. Just to give you a sense of what does 3,500 pages mean. Thank you for my prop, Carolina. Right, this is 5,000 pages. So imagine you're a nurse or a doctor or a healthcare professional trying to leaf through 3,500 pages of documentation to try to figure out. This is why, and we all experience this, we walk in the doctor's office, they ask us all these questions, where we all go, well, but you should know that. Well, why? Because this is way too difficult, how we presented the data to people today, even for the healthcare professionals. Now we'll end up with, okay, it's great, you can diagnose this, but what are you going to do about it, right? So let's bring in the world of therapeutics. This happened actually fairly recently. This is a guy who has posted on LinkedIn to try to figure out if there is a drug trial for his daughter. We have become students of this entire process. It is the most primitive thing you've ever seen. I mean, email looks advanced compared to what people are doing today to match patients to clinical trials. At the end of the day, at a macro basis in the United States, we're increasingly closing the children's units at adult hospitals because they don't make a lot of money. We could all get in a conversation about Medicaid, but they don't make a lot of money. And so it's increasingly the concentration of knowledge is actually heading into very small locations around the country. In the United States, Now let me tell you the global challenge. You may not have thought about this, but by the year 2050, there will be 1 billion children in Africa. 1 billion, right? 2 out of every 5 children born in the world are going to be born in Africa. And I just told you there's 1 cardiologist in Rwanda. We're never, the whole idea of being able to go build medical schools and medical education the way we've done it, quote, in the first world, is never going to be replicated in Africa. We have to completely rethink how this is done, and I believe that at the end of the day, the world of AI is going to be the answer to this question. All of this knowledge came together basically around COVID time. I'm sitting around going, oh, I guess we're going to just watch Netflix all day. And I thought, well, maybe we could do something useful. So I grabbed a group of engineers and we set ourselves a mission. The mission was to reduce healthcare inequity, lower cost, improve outcomes for children, locally, rurally, and globally. How are we going to do this? By creating real-time, privacy-preserving AI applications based on access to data in all 1 million healthcare machines in all 500 children's hospitals in the world. We call that the Pediatric Moonshot. We think we named it correctly. So before I get to telling you how we're going to attack this problem, I thought I'd take a minute now to talk a little bit about the word AI, artificial intelligence, in a way, hopefully, that you'll begin to understand at least a little bit of the magic underneath the covers here. As I was talking to Father John about, they're trying to infuse education about AI and software into the curriculum here. I'm endeavoring to teach a little bit of language about when we talk on the tech side, what are we actually talking about? You all are familiar with ChatGPT. I'm sure everybody's used it by now and played with it. Pretty magical, pretty interesting. So how does it work? Why is this so magical? This is a chart actually Jeff Dean, who runs Google Brain, wrote a few years ago. What it expresses is that this technology, referred to as neural networks, which I will give you a short tutorial on, is the only technology which, if you give it more data with more compute, you can get near linear improvement in the accuracy of the algorithm. Feed it more data with more computers, you'll get more accuracy. And nothing else has ever come close to this. It is really with the dawn of cloud computing. This technology, for those of you who've paid attention to it, has been around for a while. I mean, papers were written about it in the 80s and 90s. It was with the advent of cloud computing, with low-cost storage and low-cost compute, that this stuff started to become a reality, to the point that, as we all know, 2.5 years ago, what looked like out of thin air, ChatGPT arrived. So what the heck is a neural network? So this is a diagram of a software neural network. So it is designed to emulate, or it is inspired by human neural networks. In essence, there are neurons, so those little circles are neurons. The neurons have inputs. Those inputs, weights or parameters are put on them. So the input times the parameter is an input into each of those neurons. There's something called an activation function that says, bam, I'm activated if the sum of all these things is over some number, etc. So you have neurons with weights on them or parameters. You have layers of these. I'll show you how many there are in the modern neural networks. But that is fundamentally what a neural network is. It's a series of computations which are designed to emulate how we have seen, quote, how a human neuron works. So the first step you have to figure out is, well, how am I going to train this network, right? It's how do I put the right weights in how do I put the right number of layers in? So I'm using this as an example because it's a competition that got started now, got a little bit over 10 years ago, called ImageNet down at Stanford. And basically it was a contest to see whether a computer could recognize photos better than a human. Early on, they started out, humans are like 95% accurate, and computers are only 75% accurate. About 7 years later, the computers were 97% accurate. So what was going on there? So basically, in order to train the network, what you do is you get a whole bunch of images. And I'm just going to use dogs and cats and horses. A whole bunch of dogs and cat and horse images. And you take your data and you split it into a training data set and a test data set. So the training data set, you put it up there and you change the parameters, you add layers, and you go, oh, it identified, it's a dog, it's a dog, it's a dog and a cat. And oh, it's pretty good at doing this. I iterate on that. And then I take my test data set and I apply it and I go, hey, works pretty well. Okay, so this process of training is really where a lot of compute gets done as you iterate through this, coming to the conclusion of, quote, is it a dog or a cat? Now, the conventional architecture to go do this is we move all the data, all the pictures of the dogs and cats, into one data center, into one location where I learn on that data. That has been the method of how everybody has done this. Just to get you a sense of this, when you hear about Microsoft or OpenAI or whatever spending billions of dollars on infrastructure, the cost of power, et cetera, being important, it's because these data centers are chock full of computers. They're in essence doing this. And by the way, consuming lots of electricity to go figure this out, right? So that is a conventional method for doing it. Once you're complete, once you've figured out you've got your dogs and your cats, the other word for you to learn is inferencing. So you now can run inferencing. So when you're using ChatGPT, you're running inferencing. All the weights have been figured out for ChatGPT 4, and you're just inputting in and it's outputting, okay? Just to give you a sense of scale here, this first one over here, SCNet, that was the last time they actually ran the competition at ImageNet because the computers were better than the humans, so the point was already made. ChatGPT 3 was trained on 45 terabytes of data, has 96 layers, has 175 billion parameters, and then 4 is over here, trained on 1,000 terabytes of data, has over 100 layers and over 1 trillion parameters, right? So there's a whole conversation on the technical front about, how far does this go? You might have heard about DeepSeek and whatnot, but it's all iterations of how do I build better and better large language models is what these are generally called. Okay, so now you will get an exam on AI. I know you're all fully briefed, now you understand all the words. Inferencing, learning, training, parameters, neural networks. So we're talking about healthcare, let's move over to the world of healthcare. So what's the current state of the world in healthcare? Well, not really that good. So
okay, I found this on the web for So What's the Current State in the World?
About a year
Check
and
it
a half
out.
ago. And year and a half ago by Matt Lundgren, who used to be at Stanford, went off to the dark side, works for Microsoft. And Pranav, who's actually over at MIT. They actually did a study on all of the AI and medical imaging applications out there, including the ones that are, quote, FDA approved. And basically they came to the conclusion that none of it works very well, right? It works really good on the test data, but go take it out in the wild, it doesn't work so good. So the simple way I explain this is, because we live in San Francisco right now, and we just rode a Waymo last weekend, so you can go train your Waymo car to drive all around San Francisco. Let me pick that car up and put it in London. How well do you think it'll work? Terribly. It's not going to work at all. And what it turns out, when you go start to look at where the data is coming from currently to train these, you get this right away. So this is actually work that's been done by Kurt Langos down at Stanford Painting Lab. This is 3 states in the United States account for most of the data. As you can guess what it is: New York, Massachusetts, California, and then what? 13 of the 47 contribute any data, right? No diversity whatsoever. Believe me, if it's California, it is not rural California they're getting any data from. You go internationally, and again, you can kind of guess this. A lot of the data is coming from the United States and China. What a handful, 8 countries of the 193 others supply any data into this. I'll tell you a little story that I just learned. I'm spending a little time with the Seattle children's folks. So there apparently, the current standard of care when a baby's born is they take a picture of it, and software can go, well, does the kid have jaundice or not? Because basically it's just looking at the color of the kid, right? So they took this application to Africa. Did it work? Hell no. So this idea that we have got to have large, diverse data sets to make this work in an equitable way is, I've just gave you a bunch of stories that'll tell you we have to figure this out. We've been tracking about 130 research applications from around the world that are in all different areas of medicine: oncology, radiology, orthopedics. There's a team at Duke working on AI applications of low-power CT, weight-bearing ankle and foot. So hyper-specialized work in all different forms going on out there. What is true in all of these cases is they are trained on small data sets. There's a prostate cancer one done at Stanford. It's trained on 1,000 ultrasounds at Stanford. That's it. They end up publishing papers, which is beautiful. Hats off to them, but that's it, right? The ability for this to work, at the bedside is not there because it's never been trained on data. But we said, well, that's silly. There's plenty of data out there. There's data in the clinical machines, the ultrasounds, the CTs, the MRIs, right? The blood analyzers, the ventilators, the bedside monitors. There's data sitting in the research machines, gene sequencers, mass spectrometers, etc. There's data sitting in the, I'll call it the offline world, PAC systems, which is where the reports that the radiologist or the cardiologist writes. And obviously there's data sitting in the electronic medical record systems. And by the way, the data is all around the world, lots of it. We did a back of the envelope. The 500 children's hospitals on a yearly basis generate 6 million terabytes of ultrasound data just in the cardiology department. Right? If you're an AI person, you're going, boy, that is gold, right? It's not that there's not enough data, there's plenty of data. The problem is that this centralized model that has worked very effectively on the consumer side is never going to work in medicine. Number one, the data sizes are way larger. An ultrasound study is a terabyte. The security requirements are much tougher. A lot of hospitals have been hit with ransomware, etc. And the privacy requirements much stricter. Norway is saying, Norwegian data is never leaving Norway. If you go into Australia, the 3 states of Australia actually have 3 different privacy laws. Right? So we said in our mission, we said it's a moonshot. Like the original moonshot, we ended up saying, well, we need to build a new rocket. We need to do this a different way if we're going to get to the moon. And so we did something fairly simple from a computer science point of view, which is we said, rather than try to move the data to the application, let's move the application to the data. So we've engineered a distributed AI cloud infrastructure, which literally puts a cloud server inside the building in any hospital, any clinic, any ambulance in the world. Because, back to what I just said to you, All the data sitting in those ultrasound machines or those mass spectrometers, or as I'm going to show you in trial protocols of drug manufacturers or in the EMR, right? Don't move the data. Leave the data there. Move the compute to the data. Move the application to the data. So I'm going to give you a brief. There might be a few technical people out here, so I'll give you a brief on what we're doing from a technical point of view for those to satisfy your curiosity. We've engineered over 12 features. 9 of them are technical, 3 of them are not. I'll talk a little bit about the importance of clinical partnership. In essence, as if those of you who speak cloud computing, we've in essence replicated what AWS did in the very early days, which is provide compute and storage services to applications. That sits at the core of it. We've hyper-engineered around security and privacy. One of the core team members actually has 15 years of privacy law experience. So that sits at the base. On that, we developed something called digital twins, which enable access to the data. So we build twins for an ultrasound machine. Just give you an example, Philips ultrasounds, they have the big Epic 7s that roll around on the big carts, all the way down to the portable Lumifies that actually Stanford sends home with high-risk pregnancy patients. So the twin works for all that range of machines and provides real-time data to the application. We also have developed the means by which we built twins for the offline data. So to be able to have an application gain access to the PACS data, enable access to the EMR data, and in short order, I'm going to show you why and how that might be useful. The mental model we have is not too dissimilar to what Apple has done. So Apple engineered infrastructure. They gave programmers access to camera information and access to GPS, like where is it? And then told the world, go build stuff. And people built Instagram and Lyft and ad infinitum, right? We're thinking the world the same way. Hey, I'm going to give you access to a camera called an ultrasound or a blood analyzer. We actually do have GPS information. Hey world, go build cardiology applications, orthopedic applications, oncology applications. That's core to how the whole idea works. Those applications could fall into 3 major groups. You'll see this in a minute. Number 1 is, well, you could just transfer the data. In fact, we demonstrated very early on real-time image sharing. Remember Dr. Chang? We'll see him in a second. Real-time image sharing between Children's of Orange County and Bambini Jesu in the Vatican of Rome. The second kind of application, remember the word inferencing? Okay, I can run inferencing applications. So if I engineered a brain bleed analytic that looks at CT scans, it can run on the CT scanner in real time so that if anybody comes in and there's a brain bleed, the computer can go red, green, yellow, red, they need to go to emergency surgery, green, everything's cool, yellow, somebody better take a look at this, right? So that's inferencing applications. And finally, the holy grail problem I already told you is, well, how do you learn in a decentralized world? How does that work when I don't put all the data in one place? And so we've engineered distributed learning services based on a fundamental technology that was actually developed by our friends over on the consumer side. So this technique referred to as federated learning is actually, all you iPhone users, Siri's probably done this with you. So Siri's trying to get more accurate, right, as it talks to you. So how are they doing that? Well, they could be taking all that data, your voice print, and shipping it to the Apple Cloud, right? And learning on it, back to the centralized model. Well, what about that? Well, there's privacy concerns. What the heck else do you say? And second of all, right, who's going to pay for the network bandwidth moving that data around? Not on my Verizon plan, right? So they developed the techniques of how do you learn on that data locally. And only what is transmitted out of the phone is model parameters. Remember our parameters? So a bunch of floating point numbers are sent out, which are privacy preserving because you can't figure out what it is anybody said. and also network preserving because it's way less data than the actual voice print. So we've done early work that indicates this can work for ultrasound images, CT, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've started to work with people on basically a whole new class of translational medicine, which is translating AI research from the bench to the bedside. So remember I said we've tracked 130 research applications? So let's take that pediatric wrist fracture application, which was trained on only a small data set. Let's put it on the infrastructure, number one. Number two, let's do federated distributed learning. Let's learn on all the risk x-rays, all the x-rays across all the different sites. And when we come to a conclusion about what we've learned from it, we can now take that learning and put it back at the point of care. Okay? So this is fundamentally, I would say, the way in which we start to take advantage of amazing levels of research that are going around the world and not leave it in one location but spread it across the planet. I was noting on the first slide that we cannot make the progress we are without clinical partners. We've been very fortunate over time to have accumulated a lot of leaders in the space, and by the way, not only clinical leaders, but also executive leaders. Larry Moss, who's the CEO of Nemours, was one of the very early supporters of our work. And by the way, not just in the United States, but across the world. So we're working on all that. So what's it going to mean? What could happen differently? What could the future look like? So a lot of times I talk to people, I said, well, I think there's two ways to think about the future and technology. One is a Terminator future, okay? And one's a Star Trek future. So I'm going to sit on the Star Trek future side of this and talk about what that future could look like and take you through what if we could actually do this. So remember I introduced you to Anthony, so that's Dr. Chang with his son. His oldest daughter actually has a congenital heart problem. He took her into the echo lab. That's Dr. Wyman Lai with his back to you. He's head of cardiology now. He imaged her 6,000 miles away in real time. That is Dr. Alberto Tosi at Bambino Gesù, which some of you may know is one of the largest children's hospitals actually in the Vatican itself. All in real time across the planet. Super, super simple. Now, we're taking this and making it available in a much wider basis. Remember our friend Carter, who got imaged at a regional center, right? Well, we have a capability, and we're making a big point about this. There's a lot of emergency medicine sitting inside shopping centers. And so we're going, cool, there's the x-ray machine. We're going to paste a QR code on the side of it. You can walk up to it. The nurse, whoever's on staff there, can image it, the QR code. Up will pop the x-rays, the CTs, the ultrasounds for the past 24 hours. They can go select, share with Stanford, UCSF, whomever. Super simple. It's all modeled after Instagram, so no training required. Anybody can use Instagram, can use this capability. And this can be deployed easily on a global basis all the way down to a shopping center, which is really, while I talk a lot about the major medical centers, the whole idea is push this further and further out into the world. Remember the story I told you about Texas Children's of the kid that was misdiagnosed with child abuse? Well, this is actually two pieces of research work. One's going on at Columbia and one that's going on in the UK, both in wrist fracture detection algorithms off of x-rays. Again, remember my comment, right now trained on only a few images, but we have the capability now trained on millions of images. So now, at that regional hospital where the kid was x-rayed, the software could be running and go, yeah, it looks like a wrist fracture, or no, this looks like child abuse. And it be as accurate as that one doctor that happened to see this at Texas Children's. Remember my story about the kid with aortic dysplasia, right? This is a really hard one, because this is where even a human's not very good at it. because they never get to see enough cases. But for computers, 25,000, if I could see all 25,000 cases, or probably in the world, all 50,000 cases, the ability to build a focal cortical dysplasia diagnostic gets simpler and simpler. And in fact, there is a team at Great Mormon, this is a project called MEL, who's actually done a first pass of doing this. So you can now say, hey, every time an MRI image runs, the computer picks it up, looks at it, goes, yeah, looks like focal cortical dysplasia, or yeah, pass, next. Remember the story of the congenital heart disease problem? Actually, right here, not very far from here, there's research work going on at UCSF to build congenital heart disease diagnostics. Again, today trained on not a lot of data, but in this future world could be trained on immense amounts of congenital heart data, fetal heart data, and be able to run anywhere, whether that's in rural Mexico or at Packard, etc. Remember my challenge for everybody who's in the nursing healthcare profession. They're sitting there having to paw through the box, my prop. So we looked at it and went, it doesn't have to work this way. So basically, we ran an experiment in the lab. We took two patients, I'm only going to show you one. One is a cancer patient, a 3,500 page document. The other is a 35,000 page document. And we trained it. We call this a patient agent because in effect, it's like you can ask anything about the patient, anything about its past. And I'm going to let Carolina run the video. We're going to show this to you. Okay, this is the patient agent. And our patient, because I did Star Trek, his name is John Luke Crawford. So now you see.
The question asked to the agent was, how many chemotherapies has Jean-Luc Picard completed? The agent explores the patient's EMR data to identify the number of chemotherapies administered and generate a structured response. Jean-Luc Picard has completed 3 cycles of neoadjuvant chemotherapy with cisplatin and pemetrexed as of March 28, 2023. The next question asked to the agent was, what was the total amount of cisplatin administered? The agent again explores the patient's EMR data to identify the amount of cisplatin administered and generate a structured response. Jean-Luc Picard received cisplatin at a dosage of approximately 459 milligrams. The question asked to the agent was, how many chemotherapies has
So we're going to stay off my mic just not to have to switch back and forth because I'm going to show you a bunch of different things. So that, by the way, we shared with a bunch, about 12 oncology nurses around the country. We actually turned the controls over to them so they could ask anything they wanted about the patient. And I'm going to show you a couple quotes from them. That's okay. Well, I'll tell you a story while that. So we turned it over to them. They asked a bunch of questions. They were going ooh and ah. You'll see some quotes. But at one point, one of the nurses said, can we ask it, what is the prognosis for this patient? And I went, oh, time out. Yeah, and one of the guys, Andy, who's actually at Cincinnati Cancer Advisors, he said, no, guys, it has perfect recall. And you guys know some of these people. They were a great group. So Andy said it has perfect recall. I said, great. We're going to call this application Total Recall. Right? So it has total recall about anything about the patient, right, over its entire history, which obviously is very interesting in chronic and complex cases. Okay, next slide. So remember our friend here who's using LinkedIn to find an appropriate clinical trial for his daughter. Well, we started thinking about, well, we have complete profile information of the patient. Why don't we just take that, form a query into, some of you are aware, there's something called clinicaltrials.gov, which is public facing, shows you all the clinical trials. We talked to the folks at Stanford Oncology and the folks at Bristol Myers Squibb, and they said, don't even bother, right? You'll get 100 hits, only 2 will be valid because the data is too coarse-grained. Because AstraZeneca, Novartis, all of them don't actually want their competitors to know exactly what is going on. So I said, okay, so where's the real data? Well, it turns out the real data is sitting in a drug protocol document. Drug protocol documents, we've now seen a handful of these, are 300 to 400 pages of PDF. So we said, hey, no problem. We can build a protocol agent. And so I'm going to show you an example of a protocol agent. Which, by the way, as she's teeing it up, oh, here it goes.
The question asked to protocol agent was, what is the inclusion and exclusion criteria? The agent explores the clinical trial protocol document provided by AstraZeneca to extract and structure the trial's inclusion and exclusion criteria for the user. Protocol agent extracted the trial's inclusion and exclusion criteria. In summary, inclusion criteria cover age limits, confirmed diagnosis, surgical recovery, performance status, and contraceptive use. Exclusion criteria include prior treatments, medical history, infections, cardiac conditions, recent malignancies, surgical timelines, and compliance concerns.
By the way, while she's bringing the slide back up, one of the things we talked to a couple of the drug manufacturers, and they go, yeah, one of the things they have to do is figure out how to write something which a consumer can understand about a drug trial. And by the way, with this technology, it's super simple. You just go, give me a 3-page description in Spanish written for someone with a 12th grade education. It'll spit it out. I mean, it's super simple. That's a super simple application of this. But obviously, the thing we were after was, can I now ask it the question that we wanted to, which is what drug trials is John Luke eligible for, given we could have access to all these drug protocol documents out there. And so I'm going to show you a demonstration of that question asked of Total Recall.
The question asked from Total Recall agent was, what drug trials is Jean-Luc Picard eligible for? To answer this, the AI agent securely works in the back end, first retrieving the inclusion and exclusion criteria from all relevant clinical trials in the system. It then analyzes Jean-Luc Picard's electronic medical record, extracting key clinical attributes to evaluate his eligibility against each trial's requirements. As we see the loading icon on screen, all of this happens in real time while ensuring that no extra patient confidential data is breached in the process. The Total Recall agent has evaluated Jean-Luc Picard's eligibility for the AZD 9291 clinical trial. The verdict, not eligible. This is due to key exclusion factors. Jean-Luc underwent neoadjuvant chemotherapy, which the trial disqualifies. Additionally, his cancer staging does not align with the trial's requirements. While his performance status and EGFR mutations appear promising, further clarification and genetic testing are needed. The agent recommends exploring alternative trials that better match his treatment history and staging.
We're going to show this to a bunch of people next week. I'm pretty sure it's going to blow their socks off. So just to go back to the slides, obviously I've shown you just one patient and one clinical trial because it's easier to show that. But obviously what we are building here is to build a global distributed application which could have any patient profile in it. We're actually in a bunch of conversations right now about doing a whole hospital's patient agents. And then as we bring in all the drug manufacturers into it, you can now imagine on a global basis right? Anybody, whether, from anywhere, could now become eligible or not for a clinical trial, which, by the way, are getting increasingly sophisticated, particularly in oncology, where it's increasingly going down the genetic route. It's getting more complex to do by hand, so to speak, than letting computers do it. I'm going to end by telling you about something where we're kind of wrapping the two pieces together. It turns out I happen to know the CEO of the National MS Society. MS, for those of you who don't know, is a neurological disease that affects about 3 million people in the world. We are looking at how do we put the whole thing together. Remember I talked to you about diagnostics, right? How can I figure this out? But also, if I can figure it out, what can I do about it? How do you put this whole picture together? And so, on the one hand, this happens to be 3 pieces of research work that are going on out there. And how do you do earlier detection of MS using imaging technology? All of them are faced with the same problem we've talked about, which is they can't get to enough data to build accurate algorithms. Obviously, we have an answer to that question. And oh, by the way, if we were to do that, then those same patients, now we can tie them to protocol agents, and this happens to be 3 drug manufacturers involved, Bayer, Myers, who all are manufacturers of MS drugs. Which shocked me. Bristol Myers Squibb makes $6 billion annually on one MS drug. Yeah. So, Tim, his name is Tim. Tim is going to run what he's calling a big bet campaign. A big bet campaign to fund building a distributed AI lab for MS. What you're seeing on there with the little stars are across the country, including, you can see at UCSF, there are researchers who have been working in MS. By building a network like this, in essence, not only do we tie together data, but we also tie together talent in being able to go after both advancing the state of the art in diagnostics and improving the speed and cost. Because maybe the thing you don't realize is, I didn't until very recently, 30 to 50% of the cost of getting a drug to market is clinical trial recruiting. I mean, it's crazy about because it's done so primitively. And at the end of the day, they take months to years to go get this done. If we can collapse that time, it is both benefit to the patient as well as benefit to the pharma company. I'll leave you on our last holy grail. So the large language models have been talked about as being foundational models. If you look at the history of GPT, it took, let's call it 5 years to get from a very infantile version of this to a pretty sophisticated one, all with text data. Remember, there's a whole giant question with respect to imaging data. Is it possible that we could build a healthcare large imaging model for all the different examples I showed you by the year 2030? We think it's going to be possible. We are right now in the middle of building a distributed AI lab for healthcare and life sciences, 32 sites, all imaging machine data available, all PACS and EMR data available to authorized applications, roughly 3,000 servers deployed in the network, roughly 2,000 terabytes of data flowing through it on an annualized basis. And I just showed you how many different kinds of applications could be taken from the bench to the bedside in such a distributed AI lab. We have estimated completing this at rough 91 million, and I have numerous campaigns in the fire to make this happen. So in summary, if you're interested in more of what I've been talking about, we've tried to create some online presence here. So for the clinical world, we have been using Pediatric Moonshot. So www.pediatricmoonshot, you could subscribe to a monthly newsletter that we send out, kind of updating people on it. We also, as Dean just said, we've been producing Pediatric Moonshot podcast. We're actually on podcast 25. In fact, I just had the CEO of Seattle Children's and the CEO of Rady's agreed to be on the podcast series. So it's a combination of people that are, senior execs, all the way to Wyman Lai actually is up there. Wyman is one of the authors of the seminal textbook in echocardiography. So a lot of leaders in the field have joined us in terms of advancing the mission that we've outlined in the Pediatric Moonshot. On the technical front, for those of you who have a propeller on your head and want to talk more about this stuff, BevelCloud.ai is totally focused on the technical community, on what a distributed AI infrastructure is, the challenges of distributed inferencing, distributed learning. We have also created a distributed AI podcast series to bring some of the luminaries in the field working in this area together, including that's Prashant, who's leading all the work at Intel. Geraldine just graduated out of Stanford and has been working in the whole area of privacy preservation. And Andrew Wheeler is actually the director of the Hewlett-Packard Labs down in Palo Alto. And there's more on this, I just showed you three. So please, if you're interested, go check it out. I'm going to end by saying that, I'm at a university, and I'm at a Jesuit university. And I'm going to leave you with something which I left our nursing deans with, a question for both teachers and students, which is, can you teach curiosity? I think at the root of trying to do anything new lies curiosity. If you're not curious, you won't be out there investigating, figuring out a different way, trying to understand, etc. So I've long wondered about this question of can you teach it? I'll let you all debate it later on, but I think it's core and important. And last, and I said, Father John, you might appreciate this. The real reason I came out of retirement is, so I teach this class at Stanford, I do it every fall, and I always end with the same thing in class, and I end with this quote, to those much who is given, much is expected. And I look out at them, and they're all Stanford kids, I go, look, you've been given a lot. The fact that you're here, you've been given a lot. So I expect a lot of you as you leave this place. And one day I was sitting there thinking to myself, well, what about me? Shouldn't that apply to me too? So, yes, I've been very blessed in so many different ways. And I think at the end of the day, deciding to do this was really a decision based on, I was given a lot in so many different ways, and so much is expected of me. And so that expectation has led to all this work. I appreciate the time, the invitation for being here, and is there time for questions? Or
Tim, thank you so much. We've really appreciated your talk here, and the last couple of slides really resonate with me, certainly as a dean. So yes, we do have a few questions. We had our registrants, supply some questions when they signed up to attend tonight, and so as dean, I get to kind of pick and choose which questions. So I think I'm going to pull back just a little bit. As a dean, and for us in the School of Nursing and Health Professions, and I think I told you this, we've been revising our curriculum moving forward to ensure that we're preparing providers, nurses, and other healthcare providers to be ready to work in that, truly that 21st century and beyond kind of health system. So I'm thinking, what should we be doing now as educators or even practicing nurses, practicing physicians, practicing providers to, number one, to prepare ourselves for this that's coming this way and how we can best utilize it? So what should we be doing to prepare?
Yeah, I think it's a conversation I have with my tech friends on the other end, which is, I think, number one, and I'm trying to do a little bit of today, is we have to learn each other's languages, right? And so I try to teach you some of our language, and I would encourage the continuation of trying to teach the language of what we on the technical side mean when we say things like parameters and neural nets. I don't, in fact, increasingly, nobody needs to become a programmer here, right? That's not the trick. I invite you to take that on because it can be kind of interesting intellectually to go do that, but that's not the real requirement. The real requirement is to be able to speak the language. So at the end of the day, any of these applications, I don't care, congenital heart disease, any of the things I talked about, it effectively is a team of the domain expert in cardiology and the AI expert. And if they cannot talk to each other, this can't happen. And so that's why I said I think each side has to learn the other's language. And maybe that's part of how you educate us on how you pronounce some of these words and how to think about this, right? But I think that's first and foremost, is we need to learn each other's language. Second of all, and this is very much how we live in the tech world, is go play with this stuff. Just use it. Start using it in every different way you can. I don't care if that's asking ChatGPT a question and then asking another question. Just keep playing with it, because in that play, you will start experimenting your own theories about how this, what could it do, how could it do it. I just took the team today, I made that parenthetical comment that even the world of software development is going to get radically revolutionized, because these tools are just starting to be incredibly amazing as what they are. So I said that we need to play with this stuff, because the speed at which it's moving is so high that you need to be on the train with it. You don't need to, not everything needs to be successful, but engaging with it is what's important.
So planning my next vacation using ChatGPT, which I did. I have my itinerary planned using ChatGPT. So, you briefly alluded to the reduction in time and cost associated with clinical drug trials. Can you speak to some of the other ways that this technology, this use of AI and what you've described here can impact the cost of healthcare?
Yeah, this gets into something which I haven't really figured out yet.
Nobody has.
The fundamental question I wondered is, who pays for AI in healthcare? I kind of came down to the conclusion that there were two people, at least in the United States, that make money in healthcare: pharma, and you saw a response to that, and then the insurance companies.
Yeah.
The part that is very obvious to me is, and you guys can probably speak to this even more than me, is the system is not rigged for this, right? If I could diagnose something earlier, isn't that better? I could reduce the cost, improve the outcomes, right? Everything. To the point, I've observed this, that we know that some of the conditions that afflict people are all diet related, so why don't we give people better food? But the whole system is not rigged for trying to do things early in the cycle, right? It's true, what we've all said. It's, I want to wait till you're old and, et cetera, then I'm going to go do something. Which is why, a lot of times when I'm talking about the moonshot, I go, we all say these words, children are our future, but if you look at the level of investment, in the venture community, the level of investment in pediatric healthcare technology is like $10 million a year. It's mouse nuts, it's nothing, it's zero, right? And you guys know the story of Medicaid better than I do. The level of investment we put at, servicing the future of all of us is crazily under, and this is across healthcare, education, etc. We wait till the very end, and then we do something. And that question, I can't answer yet. How is it that this moves into a place? Does it happen? I was with a young company the other night. Is that part of me has wondered that, even though we are obviously working with institutional healthcare for a whole bunch of reasons, but maybe the transformation in healthcare does not happen institutionally. It happens from the consumer. This has happened over and over again in tech, right? Amazon, Netflix, all these examples where the consumer caused the shift. We've seen some of it, but I think the consumer side right now is caught with the problem of it's all about healthy people, right? Take some more steps, eat better, etc. This bridge over into the chronic cancer patient or whatever is not there because the data's not there either. But I'm not going to explain everything we're working on, but we're thinking about how do you do that? How do you begin to bring that in? And how do you then activate the consumer? Because I think at the end, that's going to end up being the answer to how this transforms, not institutionally.
So I'm actually, as you answer that, something pops into my mind, and I start to think about sort of the asymmetry of knowledge and resources among consumers. So I think that starts to lead us down the health equity, health justice path. And so again, if we have to rely on the consumer, then what happens to those, then it becomes a first world consumer driving, and of course we saw from your initial slides that really truly the need is in not the rural areas of the first world notwithstanding, but in developing countries and so forth. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts around that.
No, I think there's a challenge, which I would challenge your students to maybe they come up with the answer to this question. I mean, I showed that slide about Africa, so I'm happy to be connected to Cornell University in Africa, which is based out of Kigali. So we've been spending time talking about Africa because I made a point. I mean, it ain't going to happen. It's got to happen with technology. And by the way, they're suited to do this. They didn't put landlines in it. They went to 5G technology on day one, right? But you're faced with the question of, yes, that's true, all this technology could work. Who's going to pay for it? It keeps going back to this question. Now, my personal belief is the beauty of software, I don't think people think a lot about this, but unlike pharma and unlike medical devices, the cost of producing software is basically zero. It's mental energy is the cost of producing software. And the cost of delivering software is getting lower and lower. We're creating another way to take it lower and lower. So the cost structures of delivering healthcare with software are dramatically different than the cost structures for delivering with humans. And so maybe there's a nexus out there where we hit that it becomes more obvious that the economic advantage of doing this surrounds kind of call it the old-fashioned way of doing this, right?
Yeah. So I think our evening's coming to an end, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't address, for what for many people is like the elephant in the room, and that is the privacy issue and the security of the data. And so I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit, at least broadly, about how you all are managing that and what you foresee as some of the steps that you'll be taking in the future to, again, ensure privacy, especially because data now concerns about data for so many different reasons are rising even today.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll start out with, it was a core of the book we started with. I made mention, one of my former students has 15 years of privacy law experience, has been part of the team. So we've been thinking about privacy and privacy management from day one. And it's exhibited in multiple ways in the software, from the whole thing I just talked about, which is, no, you don't have to send the data somewhere else. You can leave it right in the building at UCSF or wherever, right? How we do data sharing, we have mechanisms that are ultra precise, because one of the things that is a central tenet of privacy management is purpose limitation, right? What is the purpose of this data? So we have it down that ultrasound on the third floor you own. You get to decide whether you share with the red application or the green application. So therefore the green application has to say, what is it going to do with the data, right? So we've developed technologies to basically de-identify at the point of care if the applications need that. One of the things we're working on, which is not technical, is, and I was up there, a distributed AI governance framework. So we were very early on trying to think about how we can make it easier for applications to come into existence. So let me give you just a simple thing. There are quite a few companies out there working on sepsis prediction. Okay? So sepsis prediction generally means I'm going to get data from a bedside monitor and try to predict whether it's going to be the kid's going to be septic. So in today's technology, and there's a team in Holland that's doing this, they have to go figure out how to get a server, put it in the building, connect it to the bedside monitor, connect a VPN connection out, manage the data, go through the security reviews, etc., before they ever get to work on the application. So I tell people this is like, okay, let's rewind the clock. 20 years, it's 20 years earlier than now. We have this great idea. Let's create a ride-hailing service that will allow us to get a car and go anywhere we want. Great idea, right? Okay. The first thing we're going to have to do, though, is we're going to have to create a cell phone, and then we're going to have to create a cell phone network, and then we can build our Uber application. That is literally the current state of developing software and technology in the healthcare world. So what we're trying to do in a governance framework is to establish governance for the fundamental data and technology, which is transcendent. It's true here in San Francisco, it's true in Singapore, it's true anywhere in the world. And then on top of that, these applications, of which I showed you some, their work is now much more minimal than what they used to have to do. But yet all of us fit within the DUAs, the DPIAs, the HIPAAs, et cetera, right, to, from a governance point of view, guarantee privacy or privacy management. Yeah, it's central to how we think about the problem.
Thank you so much. This has just been an amazing conversation tonight, and for our audience, I hope that Tim's lecture has sparked your interests in continuing, to learn about and to play with these applications and to really understand it so that you can leverage it to impact, in particular, health equity and health justice locally, nationally, and globally, just as Tim is leading the Pediatric Moonshot. I just want to again thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. Again, please join us let me start over. Please join us again on March 14th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. right here, same place, for our second evening of evidence. We had our first evening of evidence in December to just wonderful praise, and people really enjoyed it. So please come join us for the evening of evidence right before graduation this year as I said, May 14th. Our students and those who are graduating will showcase their scholarly work on topics such as adolescent health, environmental health impact, community health, and more. And I hope in the future that maybe some of our students will be sharing their scholarship on AI and health equity. And then we would just like to give you something to remember us by. We know you had your Stanford colleagues, and so now you have USF.
All right.
And I just want to remind all of you that on the back of your name tags, you have a little QR code, and you can complete an evaluation of the event. And if you have any further questions that we weren't able to address tonight, we will forward those to Dr. Chou, and we will get some answers for you. So again, please join me in thanking Dr. Chou so much.